Before we get underway on today's episode, I kinda need to explain something in order for any of this to make any sense. It's a little dry, but for fans of this series, it's kinda need to know stuff and it hasn't been widely publicized. In Japan, there was a series of games called Farm Story, which was adapted by Natsume and brought to the English-speaking world as Harvest Moon. However, Natsume no longer has the license for the Farm Story games, so what's turned out now, called Harvest Moon, is a bunch of cell phone game tier crap made by Natsume themselves. Whereas true Farm Story sequels now go under the name Story of Seasons. Where am I going with all this? Well, for the 10th anniversary of the Farm Story series, we get a spin-off of titles named internationally as Rune Factory, and its first two installments bear the subtitle A Fantasy Harvest Moon. In Japan, that subtitle was A New Farm Story. So I am reviewing a sequel of a spin-off of a sequelized set of games that have 3 different titles. No, this isn't confusing at all. Okay, let's get into it. That's why today, we're specifically looking at Rune Factory 4, and for the sake of this review, I'll actually be capturing footage from RF4's special re-release available on Nintendo Switch. The original game was released on the 3DS, and both titles are worth having. Rune Factory 4 kicks off with our protagonist, who comes in 2 convenient flavors, Lest or Frey, on an airship en route to the town called Selphia, which has the darndest quirk of having one of the legendary dragons living right in the middle of it. After a brush with some pirates from the Zex Empire and suffering head trauma, the protag finds themselves a freshly minted amnesiac, which honestly are a dime a dozen in the Rune Factory world, and soon finds the express elevator down to the town below, whereupon he'll meet the aforementioned god-tier legendary dragon, the Great Dragon of the Wind, Ventuswill. In a misunderstanding, the protag is labeled the prince or princess of the kingdom the town had been expecting, and is given the royal treatment, even as the actual prince of the land, Arthur, arrives and requests that they continue to act in his stead. It turns out he's actively involved in the researching the bizarre goings-on around Selphia. Accepting that this is their new lot in life, the main character embraces this new royal power, their new strange neighbors, and a newfound lack of long-term memory, and thus their story begins. Graphically, the game is impressive. Even its original 3DS incarnation, it's still quite stellar. The polys are pleasant and the portrait work is pure, pristine anime perfection. Every character is distinct and interesting to look at, except for Doug, and you can tell a lot about them just at a glance, as is reflective of the bright, colorful, and thoughtful designs oft found in Rune Factory titles. The monsters equally so, with designs largely taken from the natural world, but given certain anime-esque flair to make them more interesting. The bosses in particular are something to behold, not that I'm going to spoil this mind. But not only are they fantastic, but fans of the franchise can also expect a bit of a treat with some returning faces from past installments. Overall, the presentation is incredibly stunning visually, and while the special edition does have softer, rounder, higher poly count models, if you have a 3DS version and not a Switch, you won't be disappointed in picking up the older, but by no means inferior version. And sound-wise, the game's a treat. Not only is this the best soundtrack Rune Factory has yet been given, but it may be some of the best voice work too. One thing at a time though, the music in the game when you're in town is serene, pleasant background tunes to put your mind at ease on your day-to-day activities. But when you step out into the broad, scary world full of stuff that wants to give you a one-way trip to the clinic, the tempo picks up the adventurous songs to help get the pace in your pulse up. I cannot say enough good things about the music in this game, and since the special edition came with an OST CD, I suppose the team knew they had a winner on their hands. And the voice cast does a spectacular job. Not that those from Frontier, Tides, and RF3 didn't, just that these are some standout performances. Porcelain in particular is a wonderful scenery chewer, and his voice lines are a joy. Interesting thing I noticed while experimenting with my playstyle in this regard is that the lines the protagonist shouts during combat are actually dependent upon which weapon you're wielding. I had gotten so used to the longsword shout of "walk away" that when he didn't repeat it with other weapons, I was genuinely surprised. Speaking of, the sound effects in this game are quite fun, staying pretty much in a very safe, cartoony style, with most impacts being a rather silly thud or boink sound effect. Very fun. Mechanically, Rune Factory 4 is, at its core, an action RPG, but to limit it to that designation is to render unto it a grave disservice. What you choose to do within the time of any in-game day is entirely up to you. Do you want to spend the day tending to your fields like a faster-paced, better-controlled Harvest Moon title? Yeah, do it. Want to get your persona on and just spend all day talking to everyone in town? You can do it. Need some monster mats to build that super cool new back scratcher you want to make just for the heck of making it? Go out and kill all the monsters in your path, you crazy diamond. Never mind that the back scratcher doesn't actually require mats for monsters, do what you want to do. Due to the grow by doing model of the skill system, Rune Factory 4 will allow you to be whatever you want to be whenever you want to be it. And since both gaining these skill levels and regular traditional level ups both contribute to your overall stat growth, it's in your interest to take at least a passing interest in just about everything the game has to offer you. Though it does throw some freebie skills into the pot like walking and sleeping, which are just for additional HP and RP growth. Ah, yes, let us touch on rune points here for a moment, as are the one thing in the game that'll keep you walking honest. Rune Factory's unique twist on the farm story stamina system is rune points, the little blue bar you'll find beneath your green familiar HP bar. While in Rune Factories 1, 2, and Frontier, it was just a measure by which to hold the player back, your RP now behaves as a stamina system that is far more fair in execution. It will steadily grow as you level and gain skill points in the game's dozens upon dozens of potential skill growths. Thus, the more you do each day, the more you can do in each subsequent day, and thus the gameplay loop for modern Rune Factory titles are now established. You take what rune points you do have and do things with them, which builds up skill levels, which gives you better stats and more RP to play with each time, onward and upward. Don't worry about running out of things to do. The skill cap is 99, and the actual base level cap is 50,000! Not joking about that either, here's the proof. More realistically, however, is that you'll grow by doing the things you find the most fun, oftentimes going out to fight monsters in the ruins surrounding Selphia, doing helpful tasks for your neighbors in order to befriend them, learning new recipes to create new tools, weapons, and items to advance your way against ever greater challenges, and much more. To give you some ideas, you'll want to at least have some various crafting tables, which first require you to get their corresponding license in a laughably simple quiz minigame at the order station. Then you'll need to purchase the table you'll want to work from. You'll also want to be able to feed your own supply line, so you'll be mining for your armor and weapons, fishing for additional things to cook, and chopping lumber for the tables themselves. You'll also want to get good with at least one weapon, my favorite's the longswords, at least decent levels in any crafting you'll find useful, so, probably all of them if we're just being honest. You'll also want to make it a point to be useful to the townspeople, so that'll give you prince points in order to execute the aforementioned orders, some of which are licenses, some activate customary holiday celebrations around the calendar, and some are very silly and goofy like stealing everyone's hats. Further, you'll probably want to make friendly, because this game has a very important mechanic. Marriage! Okay, mechanically it's not important at all, it's purely optional and you can do it when you're good and ready, but it's fun! Like Farm Story before it, you can make friends by talking with the people in town at least once an in-game day, bringing them items on the same regularity and some other optional things. But in Rune Factory 4, you get a more interesting option. You can ask them to accompany you as you tear through hordes of vicious monsters. What could possibly spark romance faster than that? In short, each protag has 6 options, some of which you will have to progress the story forward in order to meet. And one of which is, unfortunately, Doug. Sorry, ladies. Oh, but this does take me to the next point. You'll advance the plot one of 2 ways. The first and most direct is to plume the depths of the dungeons and the areas to defeat boss monsters. This means you can take up to 2 of your favorite people from town and set off on an adventure with effectively a full expedition party. I actually don't know if 3 is a hard limit or not, as I don't actually take advantage of ranching monsters in this game in particular, but I think it's an experiment that's worth trying. And in order to make the road ahead safer, your NPC friends level up as well. The second way is, well, it's by random chance. You see, once certain parameters are set, the game rolls invisible dice each day that doesn't have any set conditions, like a festival taking place for instance, and you have some chance of queuing up a new event. This can be a good thing in that it can throw unexpected and oftentimes immensely entertaining events into a day-to-day living, but it can also be bad in that some story-based and, yes, marriage-based events will trigger in this RNG-heavy fashion, which is probably my single biggest gripe about this game as a whole, as most events are decently short and don't take but some time out of an in-game day to complete, provided that you're not already at the end of the day. Further, the event will remain in play indefinitely until you satisfy its conditions, which the game is good at letting you know when you have completed it, The problem is progressing through these can come off as a bit arbitrary. Sometimes you'll just be expected to run all over town, out of it, or even in particular directions down certain streets in order to cue the next phase of whatever's happening. Of course, I'm making this sound worse than it actually is. Most of the events are decently short and don't take but some time out of an in-game day to complete. The problem does remain in some cases, though. If this is all sounding a little bit scatterbrained and a bit all over the place, that's because that's effectively how you play a Rune Factory game. Heck, even the way time is handled is odd. The game has 120-day long years with 4 seasons split evenly over 30 days, consisting of 6-day weeks, Monday through Friday, and a holiday as the weekend. And among any of those days, you might spend it adventuring or fishing. You might roll out of bed, blow all your RP making sashimi, and then immediately turn in at 6:05 a.m. to do it again the next day with a refresh. Rune Factory is the sort of game that you'll take out however much you put into it. The overall experience is how or whatever you want it to be. The options are limitless and it boils down to what you want to do with it. And that's the beauty of it. It's an adventure game, it's an action game, it's a dating sim, it's a crafting game, and sometimes it's a lazy game where let's take your time, do whatever, go fishing. All in the name of sheer hipsterdom, you can now lord the fact that you play a vastly superior game to all your friends who are still stuck on Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. And this has been the Hipster Snek, bringing another much underloved series to light. If you liked today's episode, be sure to tap the like button and let me know that I did it justice. For more like this each week, you can tap that subscribe and bell icon down below too. All of that helps me out a lot. You can also follow me and my Tomo Bros on our plethora of social media platforms, each of which is linked in every description, every video, every time. And keep joining me here every week for my obscure games, indie excellence, and more. And I'll see you there.